Pope Leo XIV and the Journey of the Soul After Death. This is not a story about dogma or catechism. It is not a sermon or a traditional sermon. What you are about to hear are the profound words of a man who, as a spiritual leader, looked beyond the limits of human existence and returned to share truths that transcend death. His name is Pope Leo XIV. Leo XIV was not a mystic in search of followers or miracles. He was a man who spent decades in direct contact with the pains and joys of humanity, working tirelessly to build bridges of love and faith. But in a moment of deep introspection and prayer, he had an experience that transformed him completely. He called it an awakening of the soul. And in that state of deep reflection, he glimpsed what happens when the soul leaves the body not as an end, but as an essential spiritual transition for the growth of human consciousness. Leo XIV did not see this as a mystical or esoteric vision, but as a clear and universal revelation about the purpose of life and death. He described his own encounter with the soul not as something distant or intangible, but as a real and concrete experience of connection with God. "I heard a sound as if the universe was calling my soul," he said. And then everything dissolved. There was no more body, there was no more time. I simply was. And then the experience became clearer than any vision. What I saw was light, but not a bright light that would blind the eyes. It was a soft, warm, welcoming light, like the embrace of a father who finally welcomes you home. And within that light, there was no more separation, only the realization that everything I had experienced was preparation for this moment. Leo XIV found himself in a space without form or limitations. He no longer had a body or identity, only consciousness, pure and simple. And then he saw, not with his eyes but with his soul, other presences, other souls in indescribable peace. He did not know who these souls were, but he felt that they were all united in a greater purpose. There were no words there, only a deep sense of universal connection. And it was in this space of silence and light that he understood something that had never been said aloud. There is no end, only transition. Leo XIV described the experience as a journey that the soul takes to reconnect with its true essence. He saw that when the soul leaves the body, it does not go to a place of punishment or reward, but to a state of purity and truth. There is no external judgment. There are no accusations. What happens is a review of life where the soul reviews not its external actions, but the intention behind them. The soul is not judged by what it has done, but by what it has felt. And if love guided its choices, the soul feels this light as liberation. If anger or fear dominated its journey, then the soul feels a heaviness that prevents it from moving forward. He described this experience as a moment of profound self-awareness. The soul is not called to account to a divine court, but to look in the mirror of its own essence and ask itself, did I live in love? Leo XIV did not say that death is a punishment. He explained that death is a natural transition to a state of greater understanding where the soul must prepare for the next step in its spiritual evolution. It is not an end, but an opportunity for continued growth. The soul, upon leaving the body, does not go to a distant heaven or a punitive hell. It arrives at the state where it should already have been, in union with the truth of its divine nature. The new pope did not speak of judgments but of reminders. He reminded us that life is not a game of luck or fate, but a conscious choice of the soul, which before incarnating decides the experiences it will live, the lessons it will need to learn, and the challenges it will face. The soul chooses its parents, the time, and the place not by chance, but because it knows that this will be necessary for its learning. We are not here by accident. Each of us is a divine choice, an expression of God's love that manifests itself in a unique way in each soul. When we finally leave this physical world, we know that our journey does not end. It only expands. If you are reading or listening to these words, it is because deep down you may have already begun to feel this call. The call to remember. to remember who you really are, your mission, and the love that is the force that permeates all creation. Leo XIV, in his spiritual journey, shared a transformative vision of life after death. He described the experience as a return not only to the Creator, but to the pure essence of the soul, to that primordial state where the limitations of the body and the distractions of earthly life no longer exist. Death, he said, is not a rupture, but a transformation of form. When the body falls apart, the soul does not disappear. It simply dissolves into the universal truths that are already within us. What we call life, what we call death, are just two sides of the same journey. The soul, upon leaving the body, recognizes itself as part of the whole, a divine spark, returning to the eternal source. In a moment of deep reflection, Leo XIV said, "Each soul upon leaving physical life enters a field of expanded consciousness. It is not a geographical space, but a dimension of deep and enlightened understanding where there is no longer any separation between human beings and the Creator. It is in this space that the soul understands its true nature and the purpose of its journey." He paused as if wanting his listeners to absorb the magnitude of what he had just said. Then he continued, "What happens at this moment of transition is not a judgment, but a reconciliation. Not with a divine court, but with the soul itself. When the soul bids farewell to the body, it does not face punishment, but a profound reflection on its journey. It sees not only what it has done, but who it has been in each moment. Love, kindness, compassion, flaws, failures, all of life's choices become clear not as punishments, but as opportunities for spiritual growth." Leo XIV explained that this transition is not an isolated experience, but something that manifests itself through vibrational levels. He drew a circle on the board, dividing it into 4 parts. Each part represented a stage of spiritual evolution after death. The first level is that of internal reconciliation. Here, the soul sees itself without filters, without defenses. Everything that has been experienced, everything that has been chosen, becomes evident. And at that moment, there is no judgment, but a deep understanding that all choices were necessary for the growth of the soul. No matter what happened in your earthly life, what matters is what you learned from it, he said. Leo XIII moved on to the second level writing on the board, liberation and forgiveness. The soul, in reliving its life, must release everything that is still trapped within it. Anger, guilt, regret, all of this must be forgiven both by others and by oneself. This does not mean forgetting what has been done, but releasing the emotional baggage that prevents growth. Forgiveness is not an option. It is a necessity for the soul to ascend. He spoke with authority, but also with a tenderness that seemed to come from the depths of his own soul. Forgiveness, contrary to what many people think, is not a sign of weakness, but of spiritual power. It is the most liberating act a soul can perform. When you forgive, you are not only freeing the other person, you are freeing yourself, breaking the chains that bind you to the past. Leo XIII then moved on to the third level, writing, "Understanding the purpose." At the third level, the soul is confronted with the true reason why it came to Earth. Not the external circumstances, not what society has told you to be, but the true spiritual mission you came to fulfill. He explained that often during earthly life, souls become distracted by superficialities, materialism, and the relentless pursuit of external validation. But when the soul is confronted with its true purpose, everything becomes clear. The purpose of each soul is not in what you achieve, but in the energy you emanate, the relationships you cultivate, and the way you contribute to the greater good. What you offer the world, whether through love, kindness, or even pain, is what really matters on the spiritual plane. He described the last level as the most transcendent of all, called unification with the Source. At the last level, the soul is no longer seeking to understand or learn. It unifies with the Source, not as a part that dissolves, but as a part that finally recognizes itself as the Source. True enlightenment is not an external achievement. but a reconciliation with the whole, where the soul understands that it has always been part of divine creation, that it has always been loved and guided, and that it has never been separated from God. Leo XIV smiled gently and concluded, "Death is not an end. It is a return home. The soul does not go to a distant or unknown place. It returns to the place it never left, to the eternal source of love and light. And when you understand this, there is no more fear. There is only peace." Leo XIV, with a peace that reflected the depth of his words, continued to teach about the final moment of the soul's transition. He knew that although souls went through the stages of understanding, forgiveness, and unification with the Source, there was one last choice that each soul would have to face. A choice that was not based on a divine sentence, but on a decision of the soul itself to go in peace or to return to fulfill its mission. After unification with the Source, the soul feels an immeasurable peace. It knows that it was never truly separated from God, that it has always been part of the whole. But here is the part that many do not understand. Even in this state of fulfillment and light, the soul still has the power to choose its future journey. He drew a line on his board, representing the continuation of the spiritual journey. The line branched into two paths, representing the two possible choices for the soul after the transition. On the first path, the soul chooses to go in peace. It merges with the divine so deeply that there is no longer any need to return. This path is for souls who have completed their mission, who have understood the purpose of their earthly existence, and in the end have found true unity with creation. These souls become like stars in the sky, illuminating the path of others, but without the need to reincarnate. Leo XIV smiled with a serenity that conveyed the certainty that this path was a state of eternal grace. But there is another path. The second path is for souls who, upon reaching the state of unification with the Source, choose to return, not out of necessity, but out of love, not to continue their journey of learning, but to help other souls find their way back. These souls choose to return to Earth, to suffering, to challenge, because they know they can be guides. They know they can build bridges for those who have not yet awakened to the truth of their own essence. He looked around the room as if gauging the impact of his words. Then, with a lightness in his tone, he explained, "The mission of these souls is not easy. They do not return as messiahs or saviors. They return as ordinary human beings, but with a special connection to the light. These souls are those who throughout their lives offer love without expecting anything in return, who sacrifice personal comfort to serve others. Often these souls are those we see as spiritual leaders, healers, or even anonymous people who touch our lives with a simple gesture of kindness." He wrote on the board, "Choosing to return." This is the true power of the soul. Even in its highest form, the soul retains its freedom of choice. There is nothing that forces it to return. What leads them to choose the path back is unconditional love. The love that is capable of going beyond the ego, beyond personal desire, and giving itself for the collective good. Leo XIV continued detailing the characteristics of these souls who choose to return. He explained that these souls, when they reincarnate, are not perfect, but they possess a quiet wisdom that makes them beacons of light for others. The truth is that these souls are like seeds of transformation. They plant peace, understanding, and love wherever they are. But they also carry with them the challenges of human life. Even though they know that earthly life can be full of difficulties, they choose to live according to the greater spiritual purpose to help others reconnect with their divine essence. He drew a third path alongside the line representing the difficulty these souls face upon their return. When the soul chooses to return, it also chooses pain, struggle, and conflict. Life will not be easy. But the soul that returns has a deep understanding that pain is not punitive, but an opportunity for growth. And it is through this pain that it connects with humanity, sharing the light it has gained through countless spiritual journeys. Leo XIII then made a broad gesture as if to show the vastness of life and spiritual choices. Often these souls return without knowing exactly how they will be received. They may be rejected, misunderstood, or even persecuted. But the most important thing is that they do not seek recognition or validation. They are on a silent mission for those who are still asleep. They do not need to be seen. They just need to love and remember. He smiled gently, the expression on his face reflecting a deep peace. And that is how the soul grows, choosing love, choosing compassion, and ultimately choosing light, even when the world around them still lives in darkness. Leo XIV, in his mission of teaching and reconciliation, leads us to a deeper understanding of the role of the soul, not only in its individual journey, but in its connection with humanity as a whole. In reflecting on the spiritual choices of the soul, he revealed a truth that echoes with divine wisdom. The wisdom of the soul is shared across generations. With his serene gaze, Leo XIV began to explain what this meant. The soul throughout its incarnations is not an isolated entity. Each life lived is a thread that connects with many others. When you return to the body, you do not do so only for yourself, but for all those who have not yet remembered who they are. You return because as you grow spiritually, you share the light you have gained. He paused, allowing his words to settle in the hearts of everyone present. True spiritual wisdom is not about accumulating knowledge or dominating others with what you know. True wisdom lies in serving others and helping. Souls reconnect with the divine even when they don't know they need that connection. Leo XIV described how during his life he had been touched by many stories of souls who on their journeys not only sought enlightenment for themselves, but became beacons for others. He emphasized that the greatest spiritual teachers in history were not those who learned the most, but those who shared the most, those who upon understanding the light began to live to distribute it. And that is what connects us, he said. Not just our faith, but our ability to be a light for others. When the soul chooses to dedicate itself to this purpose, it transmits the wisdom acquired from one generation to another, from one heart to the next, not with words but with actions with its own vibration. He wrote the word transmission on the board, highlighting it with a thick line. He continued, "When you choose to live in light and truth, you are not only changing your life, but you are helping the generations to come. Every act of kindness you perform, every act of forgiveness, every choice to live with compassion is a transmission of spiritual light. It is not lost. It multiplies. Every soul touched by your light is a soul that passes that light on in a cycle of continuous growth." Leo XIII paused again, looking deeply at each person present as if he wanted them to understand the true impact of their lives. Each of us throughout our journey carries the responsibility to leave a legacy of light, and in doing so, we transmit wisdom and love that spans generations. When you connect with your divine essence, you not only help your soul, but you also help humanity to awaken. He added something that touched the hearts of his listeners deeply. Every generation that is born, every child that grows up carries with it the wisdom of previous generations. And every generation that passes on its wisdom to the next. But true spiritual wisdom is not accumulated through knowledge alone. It is transmitted by example, by the way we live, by the way we love, by the way we help. The spiritual example. The inner light is the greatest legacy we can leave to others. Leo XIV explained that the spiritual journey does not end with death, but expands across generations, for everything we do is a seed planted for humanity. And when the soul finally departs, it becomes part of something even greater. The collective spirit. It is when upon leaving this body you understand that you were never really separate from anyone, that your light is not individual, but part of a greater light that unites all souls, all lives, all generations. The new pope then looked out at the audience and his expression softened. He knew that this message would touch the hearts of everyone present. The highest purpose of the soul throughout its journey is not only to grow spiritually, but to contribute to the spiritual evolution of everyone around it. You do not live for yourself. You live to expand love, and in doing so, you will help humanity reconnect with its true divine essence. He smiled, and his final words echoed in everyone who heard him. When you connect with the divine light, you no longer live in search of recognition, but in search of unity and peace for all. This is the true purpose of the soul, to help souls remember who they are, and thus create a more enlightened and united world. Leo XIV, with the serenity that only great spiritual masters possess, took a step further and spoke about the ultimate foundation that keeps the soul connected to the divine faith. He explained that faith is not blind belief, but a deep trust in that which transcends the limits of reason and human perception. For him, true faith was a daily practice of surrender and unwavering trust in the divine plan. Faith, said Leo XIV, is not the absence of doubt, but the certainty that even in the shadows God is present. It is the light that guides the soul not through the absence of difficulties, but through the understanding that everything that happens has a greater purpose, even if we cannot understand it immediately. He looked at each person in the room and shared a fundamental truth. It is not the absence of challenges that defines faith, but the ability to trust God in the midst of challenges. When you surrender to the divine, it does not mean that you will be spared pain or struggle. It means that you will find strength in the midst of struggle, and your soul will be able to keep its light burning no matter how dark the path may seem. Leo XIII then drew a circle on the blackboard representing the totality of human experience, its joys, its pains, its achievements, and its failures. He explained that while human life is full of ups and downs, spiritual faith is what allows the soul to navigate through it all with serenity. True faith does not seek to escape adversity. It seeks to transcend the need for control, surrendering to the flow of life, trusting that even in the most difficult situations, God is present, guiding and shaping the way. He paused and looked out at the audience, sensing that his words were touching the hearts of everyone present. And then with a look full of compassion, he continued, "When you have faith, you begin to realize that everything that happens has a greater purpose, even if your limited mind cannot immediately understand it. This does not mean that we should accept everything without question, but rather that we should find the deeper meaning in situations, trusting that over time everything will be revealed." He then explained what it meant to live with active faith. To live with faith is to act with the certainty that you are being guided. Even when the path seems uncertain, you continue to walk because you know that every step, no matter how small, is a step toward the truth. And the truth, my dear ones, is not something you find outside yourself, but something you discover within yourself. Leo XIV made a sweeping gesture as if embracing the entire universe and continued with his immense wisdom. True faith is not simply believing in God. True faith is living as if God were within you, guiding your every thought, every action, every decision. When you live this way, life is transformed. You begin to see the divine presence in everything, in every person who crosses your path, in every moment of joy and pain. And in doing so, you connect with the divine in a direct and true way. He paused as if letting the audience absorb the depth of what he was saying, and then with the wisdom gained from years of spiritual service, he concluded, "Faith is not an abstract belief. Faith is a way of life. It is living with the knowledge that in everything there is a divine presence guiding us. And when you live with that faith, you become a beacon for others, a reflection of the divine light. Your soul shines not because you have become perfect, but because you have begun to live in alignment with universal truth." Leo XIV offered one last reflection, looking out at the vast congregation before him. True faith, the faith that heals, is the faith that connects us to the light. It is not the light of the world, but the light within that already shines in all of us. And when that light begins to shine, it doesn't matter how dark the world around you is. True faith is what keeps us steadfast. It is what gives us the strength to continue even when the path seems arduous and endless. He smiled gently and concluded, "May each of us, as we walk through this life, remember that faith is not something to be sought outside ourselves, but that it already resides within our hearts. And when life challenges us, when pain and uncertainty arise, may we know that it is faith that keeps us connected to the divine. Because in the end, true peace comes from the faith that everything is exactly where it should be." Leo XIV, with his serene and profound gaze, concluded his reflection on faith and the divine connection, and now prepared to speak about the final journey of the soul. Not just what happens after death, but the true purpose of life, and how death, far from being an end, is an integral part of this journey of spiritual ascension. Death, as many believe, is not the end of our existence. It is in fact a transition, the end of one cycle and the beginning of another. Just as life is a continuous process of growth, so too is death a transition to a new level of spiritual existence. And just as life does not end in the physical body, death is not the end of the soul. He paused, and the room fell silent, as if everyone were waiting for the continuation of what was to be revealed. Then, with a calm gesture, Leo XIV explained more about the continuous cycle of life and death. What many call death is simply a return to the origin, a return to the divine. Death does not separate the soul from the Creator. It merely frees it from the limitations of the physical body and allows it to reunite with the whole, with what we call the source of all things. He looked at his listeners with a look of compassion and wisdom. No matter how hard we try to avoid death, we will all experience it. But the real question is not how to avoid it, but how we live before we reach it. Life is an opportunity to prepare for that moment. It is an opportunity to align our actions, thoughts, and hearts with the divine, so that when death comes, we do not fear it, but accept it as a natural part of our spiritual journey. Leo XIV then described the experience of a human being who, upon leaving the body, encounters the spiritual plane. He did not speak of a distant heaven or a punitive hell, but of a state of purification and understanding. When the soul leaves the body, it encounters a space of purification where it can reflect on its life. It is not a punitive judgment, but a complete review of its journey. The soul looks at itself not through the eyes of the ego, but through the pure gaze of spiritual truth. It revisits moments of love and fear, of joy and pain, and it is in this process that it frees itself from all the false beliefs and attachments it may have created while incarnated. He drew a circle on the blackboard representing the soul's journey, and divided it into several parts. Each of these parts represents a cycle of learning. When the soul reaches the end of its earthly journey, it is not lost but returns to its pure state of essence. It is not judged but accepted as part of a divine whole. This transition is not for punishment, but for continued spiritual growth. Leo XIV looked calmly at those present and explained the true nature of spiritual ascension. Spiritual ascension is not a single event. It does not occur at the moment of death, but throughout life. Every step you take toward love, forgiveness, compassion, and truth is a form of ascension. True ascension does not happen only after death, but throughout your life, when you choose to live in harmony with the divine light. He explained that when we reach the end of our earthly journey, if we have lived authentically and in alignment with spiritual truth, death will become an open door rather than a barrier. When you surrender to the divine, when you live in tune with your true essence, death is no longer something to fear. It is a transition, a passage to the next stage of your spiritual journey. And what awaits you is not the unknown, but the known. What you already carry within you, love, light, truth. Leo XIV offered one last reflection, which echoed in the minds of all present. Life is not a race. It is not a constant struggle to avoid death, but a journey of growth and spiritual evolution. When you learn to live in accordance with the divine, death becomes just a transition, a change of state. And then you return home to the place you always came from with the peace of one who knows they have fulfilled their mission. He smiled gently, and his last words were a blessing to all. Do not be afraid. Death is just an open door to eternity, and you are always in good hands. True ascension is the ascension of the heart of love of truth. And when you reach the end of this journey, you will know that everything you did was to bring light and be light for others. If you felt something when you heard these words, it is because you are already in tune with the truth. Remember, life is a journey of constant growth. Death is not the end, but a new opportunity to return to the light. Choose to live in harmony with the divine, and when the time comes, you will know that spiritual ascension is just a continuation of what you have always been. May we all live as Pope Leo XIV taught us, with faith, love, and the certainty that we are never alone.